Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another one of our product tutorials, we'll call it. And today I want to talk a little bit more about furled leaders. You've heard me talk about furled leaders. I do really like these things for dry fly fishing. Just to be clear, this is America.
It's America.
You can do whatever you want, but these are just absolutely not good for streamers, and they're absolutely not good for nymphs. We've covered ad nauseum streamer leaders and nymph leaders, but these furled leaders, I still get a lot of questions about these, and I thought we'd just talk a little bit about them today. I'm coming at you, by the way, from central Pennsylvania. We're here at Spruce Creek with our great friend, the Flagler family. You all know Tim Flagler. And right now, we're here in early November. The creek is very low and very clear. And these furled leaders, they do a great job of delivering smaller dry flies, really on flatter water. I don't use these thread furled leaders out in Montana. I'm going to much prefer a mono or a poly leader, say for throwing a grasshopper. But if I'm throwing size 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 dry flies, it's not overly windy, and I'm not casting overly far. These furled leaders just excel. And they come in, first of all, they're furled thread, which is kind of almost like braided. And they come in several different colors. I do prefer the natural color. This is I think an olive. They make kind of a tan, but they do make them in bright colors should you want high vis, which in certain situations there's nothing wrong with that, and it can be an advantage. They come in 5 foot, and essentially what they are is butt sections, tapered butt sections of leaders, and you're going to add tippet or a transition piece in tippet, which we're going to talk about here. They also come in 6.5 foot. I prefer the 5 foot for most situations. That allows me to essentially add 3 to 4 foot of tippet, and I've got an 8 or a 9 foot leader. So these do come right out of the package with a loop in the end. And it's not a problem if you prefer to go loop to loop. So you're just going to loop to loop, line through leader, leader through line, as we always do. I prefer to snell mine on. You know, I have specific dry fly rods, specific dry fly lines, and I prefer to snell that on there because I just don't need the loop. It's just not necessarily for me to have the loop, and therefore I just snell it on because I'm not going to change this. This is, once I tie it on there, it's permanent. This one's been on there for 10 months, something like that. But if you do use loops and you're going to be switching between dry flies, nymphs, and streamers, then you're going to want loops, no question. And then there's nothing wrong with it. But on the front end of this is a tippet ring. And I personally don't like the tippet ring on these. And that's just me. If you want to try it with the tippet ring and you like it, that's great. I know that our friend Kelly says tippet rings are not a problem with a dry fly leader, and that may be true. I just do something a little different and I modify these. So if you're going to snell this onto the fly line, word of warning, do not cut the loop first. You have to snell with this loop intact, and then you're going to cut it. Otherwise, if you cut this, it unravels. So the same thing. Well, before we start with that, the first thing that I do when I buy a furled leader is I coil it up and I drop it in my liquid high and dry fly floating. I drop it in there, let it saturate for a few minutes, and then I pull it out and I let it dry overnight. And what that does is it theoretically permanently waterproofs this thread. It's going to help it to float a lot better. No question, it makes a big difference. So soak them in the high and dry liquid floating. It doesn't take long, just a couple minutes, let it saturate, and then let it dry completely overnight. I wouldn't do this and then head right out to the stream. And then when you're on the water, I've also found this high and dry paste floatant. Not only does this work on the furled leaders, it also works great on mono leaders and as well the tip of my fly line. Because all of this stuff needs to stay high floating. Even the butt section on a nymph leader should stay high floating. So this high and dry paste floating is something that you should always carry with you and be dressing the tip of your fly line and the butt section of your leader in certain cases. But what I have found is what gives me the perfect bell curve or transfer of energy is off the tip of this. What I do is I'm going to snell on a section of 3X tippet, just standard 3X nylon tippet. You can go maybe about a foot or so, okay? And when you snell this, it's just like snelling the butt section onto the tip of your fly line. It's just kind of a micro situation. So here's my snelling tool, which is nothing more than a stiffener. I'm going to put the tippet ring right out front there along with the tool. I'm going to take what's going to become the butt section of my tippet, and then I'm going to snell this 3X right onto the furled leader. So I'm usually going to go 7 turns. Grab this, pull the butt section out, and then it should have a perfect snell. Pull that tight. Forgot my hemostats. And there, that 3X is snelled onto there. Can't hardly see it. And now, and only now, can I cut that small little piece off that has the tippet ring, and I've just gotten rid of that tippet ring. Again, it's probably not that big of a deal. I just personally think that they work a lot better. And then also what this does is, again, I really found that this 3X gives me just about the right bell curve coming off the front of this leader. And now, if I'm running 3X tippet, which I rarely do with small dry flies, I'm fine. I can just add some 3X. If I'm running 4X, I can just run 3 to 4 foot of 4X off this little connector. And what I'll often do is just go ahead and give yourself enough room so that you don't eat this thing up too quickly over time. If you do, you can just redo this. It's not that big of a deal. You're not taking up that much. But I'll come up here and I'll put a perfection loop. And if you're not familiar with the perfection loop, I'm sure we have a link to a video on how to tie it. So I'll put a perfection loop in there, and now I can just go loop to loop on my tippets. Kind of a general rule on tippets, if I'm going to 4X, I can just run my 4X. If I'm going to 5X, I can probably jump from 3 to 5, but I probably wouldn't jump from 3 to 6. So I might build what we might call a compound tippet. So I can tie these up in advance, and I can have them in my leader wallet in my vest and say that I've got a 4 foot 6X tippet. Well, I know it's coming off of 3X, so I'll probably have a foot of 4X as transition and maybe 2 to 3 foot of 6X to round out the tippet, and that's what you might call a compound tippet. So I'm actually going 3X, 4X, 3X, a short piece of 4X, and then 6X. Again, if I'm just going 4X or 5X, I can just go loop to loop. And now I can put a perfection loop in that tippet. I can go loop to loop, and then I should not have to cut back into this connector. Let's face it, you may have to at some point, and that's not a big deal. You'll still have plenty left. This doesn't have to be any particular length. So again, I prefer to snell these onto the tip of my fly line, but a dry fly leader is supposed to collapse anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. I just prefer having my leaders knotted to the tip of my fly line as opposed to using loops. I think it lands a little bit better on the water. And it's also easy to bring into my guides should I have to bring that leader up into the guides. And then I'm going to build a compound tippet on this, and off I go. And again, I use these things a lot for dry fly fishing. On these lines where I've snelled it on, they're always on there because this is my dry fly line and a particular dry fly reel that goes onto a dry fly rod. Again, if you're switching between nymphs, streamers, dries over the course of the day, you're going to want to stick with loops. So there you have it, friends. A little bit more on furled leaders. You can, of course, find these at Mad River Outfitters. They're available in the thread version. And if you did want something a little stiffer for, say, throwing a larger dry fly or even a grasshopper, we do offer these in a monofilament version, which is quite a bit stiffer. Basically just butt sections of leaders for dry flies. Again, I would not at all ever recommend these for streamers or for nymphs. So there you have it, friends. Just a little bit on furled leaders, which I've been here in central Pennsylvania using for the past couple of days. Reminded me how much I enjoy fishing with them. In fact, we just did a Orvis podcast with our friend Tom Rosenbauer, and Tom and I talked quite a bit about them, and Tom was reminded on how much he loves furled and what they used to call braided leaders. So anyways, again, you can find these at madriveroutfitters.com. They are actually made in Ohio. A great friend and customer makes these all for us, and when he can keep up, which he's doing a pretty good job, but we're selling a lot of them. So anyways, as always, friends, we appreciate you being here. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button. That really helps us out. And hop on over to our website. Register for our monthly newsletter. And hey, man, pick up a hat or shirt or some floating or something sometime. We appreciate your support. In fact, we depend on it. So thanks as always for being here, and stay tuned. We've got a lot more fly fishing and fly tying content coming your way. Thanks for being here.